Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we discuss the Primarch of the World Eaters, Angron, as we debate just what his true purpose could have been. Just what traits was he supposed to represent? General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Well, with the much anticipated World Eaters release coming later this year, it certainly seems like Angron will soon come back into focus in a big way. The greatest champion of Khorne, forever enslaved to not only the Blood God, but so too his all-encompassing rage. Angron was always said to represent the Emperor's fury, a primal reflection to his brothers Sanguinius and Russ. And indeed, we've even had Primarchs reflecting this way within the lore. However, for me personally, as the lore has evolved over the years, as the development of Angron has continued, I've become much more inclined to believe that Angron was never intended for this kind of purpose, as we've discussed some before on the channel. That rage was never meant to be his dominating trait, and so perhaps Sanguinius or Russ were never meant to be his true mirrors. Now, the reasons for my strong belief in this regard come largely from his Primarch series novel Angron, Slave of Nuceria by author Ian St. Martin. And I think when the Primarch series is all said and done, this one will easily be in most people's top 5, as it gives a real in-depth glimpse into the history of Angron's time upon Nuceria. Now, to recap, Angron, as we know, was never truly given a chance at life. From the moment his capsule landed upon the sands of that bitter world, he knew nothing but suffering. Assailed immediately by Eldar, attempting to prevent the bloodshed he would go on to inflict, Angron would be led only into the waiting hands of the slavers. His next memories were fighting for his life amid the gladiator pits of Nuceria, surrounded by other terrified souls. And this here is where the revelations of Angron's truer nature begin for me. The subtle clues that point to a man not moulded by rage, and in fact, maybe quite the opposite. As the young child Angron awakened within the arena, he was surrounded by 100 or so fellow humans, and the arena began to flood with acid, forcing the people to climb a pyramid in the middle to stay out of its increasing reach. And inevitably, as the land available became smaller and smaller, the people began to turn on each other, fighting for the safe ground. Now, Angron resisted the urge to fight back, or kill the people trying to push him off, and that in itself is nothing too out of the ordinary for me. The Primarchs were all created with some form of an instinctual understanding that they were made to protect mankind. Yes, some Primarchs perhaps were not quite so reluctant for bloodshed. However, we see time and again across the Primarchs' early years how many of them fought to protect the people of their worlds. So I see no reason why Angron would be any different. However, it's what happened when Angron witnessed people falling into the water, boiling to death within that acid, that really stands out for me. As every time a slave hit the acid, it hurt him. And not only that, there's a line that describes it as merging into a lightning storm behind his eyes. Now this could simply be a bit of poetic license for the author, however for me it certainly feels a far stronger reaction than your average Primarch. Something that could easily be taken as some form of psychic reaction or power. And so this implies to me that Angron at the very least has a very protective instinct about him. Again, yes, all Primarchs should have this to some degree, but seeing this inner reaction, this feels particularly strong. That Angron in some way could feel the pain of their deaths. And again later during the Slave of Nuceria, before Angron becomes victim to the implementation of the nails, we see him undoubtedly display some form of psychic power. Angron, now grown, witnesses a young slave suffering from nightmares, his first terrifying experience of the arena. And here Angron approaches him as he sleeps, softly placing a hand upon his shoulder, before seeming to somehow absorb the pain and the nightmares, taking it in himself. And then he does the same again for the rest of his fellow slaves, taking on all of their torment and pain, so they can share at least one night of peaceful sleep. This is not a Primarch destined for rage. This is not a Primarch created for savagery. Angron appears to have some form of empathic psychic power, the ability to draw out others' pain, whether physical or emotional. Here he takes on that pain and burden himself, so that his brothers and sisters might sleep, an honourable and emotional sacrifice. For me, I just can't rationalise a Primarch with this talent being created to fulfill a role of rage and anger. He seems far more destined to fulfill a role of healer. And I'm not talking in the specific sense of acting as some form of doctor. I mean more in a spiritual sense, one who could foster the bonds of brotherhood between his true brothers, who could associate with their struggle. The talents and traits of the Primarchs overlap in many ways, and for me I could see elements still of a Sanguinius, just not in regards to his rage. Traces of Guilliman's humanity, and undoubtedly more so of Vulcan, the renowned heart of the Primarchs. And in truly thinking of the aspects and traits of the brothers that overlap, it certainly feels like most of these have a very similar mirror. The inner rage of Sanguinius, the outer mask of Russ for example, the shadow of Kurz and Korax, the duty of Guilliman and Dawn. However, for Vulcan's compassion, I'm not sure there really is a true mirror. He has Ferrus and Perturabo for their artisanry, if that's even a word, and many of his brothers reflect aspects of his heart, but I don't feel like there's one who is nearly all-encompassing as many of the mirrored pairs could appear to be. And that would make perfect sense if it was Angron who was supposed to fulfill that role, who simply never got the chance. Vulcan who can endure any pain, and Angron who can feel it. How different things might have been. It doesn't necessarily mean a close relationship between Vulcan and Angron by any stretch of the imagination, as personalities are completely unique. Some people get along, others don't. For example, despite their similarities, Kurz and Korax can't stand each other. However, you'd certainly feel like this common bond between Angron and Vulcan would surely lean towards them having some manner of kinship. Now, with all that said, regardless of the butcher's nails, there is another element within the lore that suggests Angron was perhaps always intended for a more bloody future, and that is the history of his legion, the former warhounds that they were. Their early history shows that they were used in many particularly bloody encounters, and that their recruits seem to display particularly aggressive traits. However, it does have to be said that most of this information was from the Forge World books, as opposed to Black Library novels. And for me, if you take a look at the Legion as it's portrayed within the Primarch series novel Angron, Slave of Nuceria, before the nails have been implemented, I personally see a far more honour-bound Legion than one possessed or motivated by rage. The Legionaries have a tight-knit brotherhood. They march together in battle, not in a bloodlust, but in a calm, tactical, and rational manner. Akin to the ancient Greece of old, they employed their own variations of phalanx tactics. And you could even see a resemblance to the culture of ancient Sparta, renowned as strong and fearless warriors, but certainly not dictated by fury. And so I think the Warhounds have suffered a bit of a mischaracterization, stereotyped by what would transpire within their future. And if anything, it makes the fall of their legion all the more tragic. Again, we need to remember that yes, all the legionaries are created for war. Vulcan may be renowned for his compassion and humanity, but his legion is still capable, still created, for war. The Salamanders are just as capable of destroying any foe, as much as their fellow legions. The simple difference is they will do whatever they can to save innocent lives in the process. Given the glimpse into the true history of Angron that we have seen, I would be hard-pressed to say that that Primarch would not be exactly the same. So, we have the compassion and empathy showcased by Angron, and we have a legion that appears, to me at least, to showcase a strong sense of brotherhood, a sense of martial honour and commitment to duty. I think you could certainly see an element of that in how Angron fosters the relationship with his fellow slaves, the way he laments the loss of his brothers and sisters after the Emperor has taken him, how he mourns their deaths. So perhaps Angron could have been the mirror for Vulcan, one of empathy and compassion. Perhaps he could have exhibited traits of naturally fostering a strong brotherhood and connection within his fellow Primarchs. A similar trait, it could be said, to the likes of Horus and Sanguinius. Perhaps he and his legion could have represented a strong line of martial honour, an undoubted similarity to the Lion and Rabute Guilliman. For me, this was the Angron that the Emperor intended, but not the one he ultimately received. The son who cried for freedom and ended eternity as a slave. But as always everyone, what do you think? Which of his brothers do you think Angron was truly supposed to mirror? Like me, do you see an undoubted similarity to the compassion of Vulcan, the brotherhood of Horus and Sanguinius, and the martial honour and duty of the Lion and Rabute Guilliman? Or instead do you feel that Angron was always intended to be the Primarch he became, regardless of the butcher's nails? Angron was made to be the Emperor's destruction. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. If you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.